Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this author interaction organized as a part of the NLF Reading Challenge 2021. My name is Priyadarshini, and I'm a reading specialist at Neev Academy. We are very excited to be here, and we hope that you are too. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 6-month-long reading event from January to June 2021 for students between 10 to 13 years of age. It is open to participants on the competitive and the non-competitive tracks. We have students from across India participating in the challenge. In addition to fun book-based activities and regular author interactions, the challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies, respectively. They will also win certificates of achievement and a great set of books. Before we dive into the interaction, we would like to point out to our audience that this is a webinar, and so we will not be able to respond if you raise your virtual hand. Please do type your questions in the Q&A box instead. In fact, if you already have your questions ready, please feel free to type them out. If you're a student, a teacher, or a school librarian, please do mention the name of your school along with your question as well. We're sure you're all eager to get started with the session, just as we are. So before we do, we just want to acknowledge that our country is going through a very difficult time at the moment. We hope that these sessions are a small breather for everybody who is watching. We hope that by helping us think about the characters in books that we have loved, these sessions can possibly play a role in us viewing our own lives and the world around us differently. Today we have with us a very special guest, the very popular and award-winning author, Nancy Springer, whose book, Enola Holmes, The Case of the Missing Marquess, most of us have read. Nancy Springer is an American author of fantasy, young adult literature, mystery, and science fiction. Her novel, Lark on the Wing, won the Tiptree Award in 1994. She also received the Edgar Award from the Mystery Writers of America for her novels Toughing It in 1995 and Looking for Jamie Bridger in 1996. Additionally, she received the Caroline W. Field Award from the Pennsylvania Library Association in 1999 for her novel I Am Mordred. A prolific writer, Nancy has written more than 50 books over her career that has spanned nearly 4 decades. She released her first Enola Holmes book in 2006, following which she published 6 sequels in the series. Her other series include Book of Isle, which is a fantasy series, and The Tales of Rowan Wood. Her work, The Enola Holmes Mysteries, was adapted in 2020 as a Netflix film. Welcome, Nancy. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Am I here?
Yeah, Nancy, the video.
Okay, never mind. There we go. There we are. Hello.
So nice to see you. Okay, now we're sure that the members of our audience have a lot of questions for you. So our first question for you, Nancy, is, now when you began writing, you've mentioned that it was an outlet for you, and also as a way for you to find yourself and to find meaning. We also know that you have written across genres. So what is it that drives you to explore the different genres of writing?
When I first started writing, it was necessary to do it. It was my emotional way of coming to terms with myself. That's why, as you mentioned in your questions, I wrote fantasy, because I could take my inner baggage, my problems, and give them voices and set them loose on a landscape and let them fight it out. And I did that for 10 years. And then I think maybe close to 15 years. And by then I was established as a writer, but I wanted to try different things. So I had a goal in mind to try all sorts of different writing. And it wasn't a good career move. It was just me. A good career move would have been to stay in one genre my whole life and get a lifetime achievement award or something. But no, it was just me.
Well, that's amazing. In fact, I think it's a dream of all writers to explore every genre and excel at it like you have. So it's really amazing. We also know that Enola Holmes is your first historical fiction series, right? So, how was historical fiction writing different from fantasy, magic realism, even science fiction? How much artistic license did you have?
The main difference was that I had to be careful about the research. But really, when you write fantasy, you're creating a world that your readers are not familiar with. And when you write historical, you're doing the same thing. It's just that you try to, instead of making it up, you try to get it historically accurate. And even writing fantasy, it's not so much making it up as making it real within the fantasy. You can't just go anywhere with it. You have to preserve story logic and story tension. So it was different, but it was also the same.
Well, also the fact that it was a reimagining of literary classics that already existed, right? So it is like reimagining history in a way when you wrote Enola Holmes and connected it with the Sherlock Holmes canon, right? So was that easy to do? Did you have to adapt your writing consciously? Did that come naturally to you?
I think Enola became so alive to me that I just loved using my big words. Most of the time, I think in a way I am Enola. I am a rebellious person with a large vocabulary. So I was like, here's a chance to use ululation. Here's a chance to use rapscallion. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, Enola appears like a female beacon, really, in the male centric world of mystery fiction, right? Um, which in itself, like, we have a student, Ananya Kanchan, right, who has written in. She has asked, why did you want to introduce Enola as a curious and wild child in an age where this was frowned upon? While we know that you're talking about drawing her from your own life. Um, was there a message there?
Well, I'm a feminist. There's
Mhm.
no good. Yes. Uh, I think it was just, again, a matter of being true to myself. Um, if I had lived back then, I would have made a terrible Victorian. So if it had been me, this is what I would have done. I would have done these things to avoid being bossed around by a bunch of entitled men. And it came fairly naturally to me. It didn't require a lot of thought. It was just who I am.
So, well, following up on that, so do you think also it is important to represent stories of female characters from times when they haven't been represented as having freedom or even appearing as strong characters in literature the way Enola has?
I think it's certainly not me that started it. Over the past several decades, there's been a growth, a tremendous growth in attention to strong women and fiction writing of strong female characters. So I certainly haven't started a trend. I've just continued with a trend that was already there, and I'm very, very happy about that. I'm happy to see women coming into their own in my lifetime. Well, there's been such a change just in my lifetime. When I was in college, I was what they call the college was my parent, and it told me what to do in loco parentis. And within a year after I left college, everything had changed. I was just born a little bit too soon. And during my lifetime, everything has changed. I was just born a little bit too soon.
Well, but it must be amazing, right? Like you said, in your lifetime, you see such a change happen, right?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to see how much things have changed. I watch old movies and I say, oh, thank goodness things have changed.
So just like you, right? Enola is a feminist character ahead of her time. Like you said, you were born in a different, you were born too early, right? We see, we see Enola subverting Victorian traditions, right? She uses the bustle and the corset and turns them into devices of empowerment instead of things that limit her bodily, right? So similarly, and you said you are drawing from a history of feminist characters. So who would your favorite feminist characters be from literature?
From literature. Now you stumped me. One of the books that I wrote on my list of books that really, really shaped me was To Kill a Mockingbird. And if you think of Scout as a feminist, she was just she was an androgynous person. She was not yet in puberty, and she was just a strong child. And I think she would be one of my favorite people in the whole world.
We see that kind of strong personality in Enola as well, where she doesn't care about how she's dressed. She doesn't care about what the other kids from the village or her brothers or family says about how she dresses, right? She's
Yes.
also encouraged by her mother. So there is a very interesting mother-daughter relationship we see there. It didn't just come from nowhere for Enola to be like that, right? She got it from her mother, which I think it's a really interesting relationship that you've kind of shown us in that, right? At first, we see her angry with her mother for abandoning her. Then later, we see her empathizing with her, right? So, is that something you kind of plotted out, or did that happen on its own?
Well, I had a mother,
Mhm.
and she was very much like Enola's mother. She was an artist. She painted in watercolors. She made a living, a very good living, by painting in oils also portraits of people's pets. And I did have a father, unlike Enola, but he was kind of in the background. My life pretty much orbited around my mother, but she was preoccupied with her work, and it was kind of a distant relationship. My mother did not like strong emotion to be expressed. She did not want crying. She did not want shouting. She did not want anything to disturb the peace. She smiled a great deal, almost constantly. And yes, like Enola, I have been angry at my mother for not being more of a mother. And also, I admire her hugely for being the character that she was. She was a very smart, strong woman in the 1950s, which is not a time when smart, strong women thrived. So that I didn't realize until I had finished the first book that it was me. When I went to turn the book in, I got butterflies, and why am I so nervous? I've been doing this for years. And then I realized I have two much older brothers, and I had a mother very similar to Enola's mother. And as a child, I just sort of ran through the fields and woods. So we have all that in common.
I do feel that as writers often do use themselves as muses in that way, right? They
Oh,
draw from
yes,
their
we
own
must.
lives. Um, and I guess when we're talking about how your mother was, say, a different from the other people in her time, like she as well was ahead of her times. But we also know that your parents were both kind of living around a time that was close to the Victorian age themselves. Um, and we know that we've heard that they would use expressions like, oh, my stars and garters, and my word. Um, so do you think, right, the research that you put in for Enola Holmes, obviously it helped inform the character. Do you think it also helped you understand the context of where your parents came from, why your parents were the way they were?
Yeah, I'm not sure. In a way, I've spent most of my adulthood trying to figure out my childhood and my parents, and that informs a lot of my books. So, yes, my parents were born in 1906 and 1909. So that's pretty close. And my father was very, very British, which means, stiff upper lip. And again, no emotions, just be tough. Don't make a fuss. And I don't think I fully understand them even now, but it didn't hurt. It was interesting to live in their world for a while.
I assume, like, also because, well, Sherlock Holmes, right? From the original Sherlock Holmes, we know him to be the great detective, and he was a brilliant mind, and he was known across London and the world as the best detective, right? Sherlock Holmes from the canon. Yet when you write about Enola, you also show Sherlock Holmes, you imagine or reimagine Sherlock Holmes the man, the one who is ignorant about matters of women. He even underestimates the women in his family. So is that an opinion like that you held, that you got from the original Sherlock Holmes that you put here?
What happened actually was that I'd been working with a certain editor for years. And that editor phoned me and said, how's about if we write something set in London at the time of Jack the Ripper? And I thought, no, but he was a good editor and I liked to accommodate him. So I thought, what have I read that was set in London at the time of Jack the Ripper? What classic I wrote about King Arthur. When I was a kid, I read about King Arthur. I wrote about Robin Hood. When I was a kid, I read about Robin Hood. What else did I read every single Sherlock Holmes story over and over and over again when I was a child until I had memorized them and they were part of me. And that was that at the time of Jack the Ripper? Yes, it was. So it was because of the editor suggesting, but I'm sure he never expected me to end up with Enola.
It's really like, I feel like, of course, it's a detective novel. I mean, it's a mystery novel, but I also feel like it's such a strong feminist work, especially for younger readers who are coming into the world of literature and experiencing it. Um,
I'm amazed that nobody did it before me. It's such an obvious weakness in Sherlock Holmes that a smart woman could just run rings around him because women had everything about being a woman in the Victorian era was a kind of a conspiracy and a kind of a covert operation of how to get around the men. So they had all these secret codes, the postage stamps, the flowers, the fans, the calling cards. They had their own like secret society. This is how women function. This is how women help each other out. And it was right there all the time. And Sherlock Holmes was totally unaware of it. he thought that everything women did was frivolous, that they acted out of unfathomable, there's a word, unfathomable reasons that having to do with too much powder on their nose or not enough. And well, that was silly of Sherlock. But the author, Conan Doyle, I think shared those views. So he left an opening for me, and I took it.
And we're all really glad that you did. Um, similar to that, there's also the way we see Miss Marple from Agatha Christie, right? Who also does what, from a different time, what, well, the Victorian women that kind of used their femininity as code. Um, so I think that's really interesting as well, like in ways that we wouldn't necessarily see it as strength or traditionally, but there was always intelligence, there's always ingenuity in which um, women have walked through the ages, right? Even the fact that you use ciphers, the fact that Enola itself is the word alone spelled backwards, right? Have you always been interested in ciphers or solving codes?
That that was a genuine Victorian name. They chose odd names for their women. Perdita, which means lost, Dolores, which means sad. Oscar Wilde's sister was named Isola, the isolated one. And the word Enola, it did exist. The Enola Gay, the airplane, was named after the pilot's mother. There's a little town in Pennsylvania called Enola, which is named after the founder's mother. So it's a genuine Victorian name. And it does spell alone backwards. And I guess they wanted their women to sometimes be alone. I don't know. Excuse me, cough drop time.
It definitely worked for the way the plot went, right? The fact that in her aloneness she was able to find so many ways to use her intelligence and grow it. So I think that's really cool about Enola Holmes. We have a lot of your fans have written in from different schools. Um, and they especially would like your advice and pointers on writing.
Oh,
Um, I would like to go through a few of these. So we have Ananya Srivastava, who says, I'm 13 and I love Enola Holmes. I'm working on a story of my own. I was wondering how to develop strong characters. We also have Ria Bopanna from Neev Academy. She says, what tips do you have for writers? Um, there's there's a couple, so I'm just going to read them all out. They're within the same area. Um, so we have Shrihan Mathur from Shiv Nadar School, Noida, who says, "What are the essentials of writing a story?" Um, so yeah, everyone would like to know about your process of writing, how you go about being a writer and crafting a story.
okay. Well, the main thing is patience, 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 patience. I have a motto, TTT, things take time. I don't look at the clock. I don't look at the calendar. I don't know when I started to write the book. I don't know when I finished writing the book. I don't know how many drafts I did. And oh, by the way, I've published close to 60 books, but I've written over 100. And a lot of them ended up in the trash. So this is just, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And rewriting is not extra, it's part of. It's understood that you will rewrite. And by rewrite, I mean totally reshape. You'll take the story to bits and put it back together again in a different way. You'll change the order of events. You'll drop some parts out. A lot of beginning writers end up starting by dropping the first, say, 3 chapters of their rough draft and starting the story closer to the end so that you're more in the action rather than just that's actually a problem I should have corrected in the very first Enola Holmes book, The Case of the Missing Marquess. I like it the way it is, but I noticed in the movie they took the whole first half and condensed it into like 2 minutes. So I could have gotten her out of that house sooner and on the road sooner. It took me half the book to get her on the road, but I got away with it. But if I had been younger, maybe I wouldn't have gotten away with it if I had been less experienced. So go to workshops. Listen to the advice of other people, but don't listen too hard. Keep what is you. What happens at workshops often is you learn a lot of good stuff, but they overthink and they overcorrect, and you lose the personality, the spirit, the spontaneity of the writing. So it ends up feeling like it was written by a committee. Just enjoy workshops, enjoy advice of other people for what it's worth. But remember, they're usually no more experts than you are. And even if it is experts, even if it is editors or literary agents, they still, on a certain level, you still know better. They may say, you ought to do this, that, or the other thing to this part. Well, all that tells you is that there's something wrong with that part. And what you do to it may not be what they said at all. But they're always happy when you finish. At least I should say they're always happy when I finish. But I need a lot of advice along the way as I write a book. The Enola Holmes books, they went through the editing process just like everything goes through the editing process. And I made many changes. And they're still being edited, but they're being published in England. And I'm finding out that they're saying, no, you shouldn't have said railroad. You should have said railway. And no, you shouldn't have said bangs. You should have said fringe. And so on and so forth. And I'm like, where were you when I needed you?
Well, I personally feel like if we didn't have the first few chapters of Enola Holmes, we wouldn't really know the insides of her mind and the way her relationship with her life, right, and her family and the way she worked. So
yeah,
I think
it turned out okay. But at the time when I handed it in, this book structurally, it's awful. It's half the book is about her getting ready to leave, and then half the book is about later. And this is not good structure, but sometimes you can get away with things.
we know that you wrote your last Enola Holmes in 2010, but we've also heard that the new one is out this August. Is there anything we should expect?
It is the new one called Enola Holmes and the Black Barouche. Mm-hmm. Is about her working with Sherlock, whether he wants her to or not. He doesn't really welcome her involvement. It just happens, and I'm not going to tell you how. That would be a spoiler. But he ends up, we end up with a very involved plan that includes not only Sherlock and Enola and Watson, but also Tewkesbury, Lord Tewkesbury from the first book. He comes back, and a cast of many characters. So it was a huge plot that had to be undertaken to achieve the end, to achieve a rescue. And it was great fun. It was great fun to write. And I think it's great fun to read. And also there's a crazy horse in there. Horse. I love horses.
We're really excited for the book to come out and to read it. So we have one last question before we conclude our session. And that is an important question we need from all of our authors, right? So if you could have a shelf of books that helped make you who you are today, what would the titles on this shelf be?
Well, books that shaped me really, books that shaped me. I made a list. Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, The Ring Cycle, because that completely opened up the whole fantasy genre. Before that, it barely existed. To Kill a Mockingbird, which I think I mentioned before. That was a book that just grabbed me and took me in. I thought back to my teenage years, and that was a book that I had to read it with. I was in the bathroom with the bathroom door closed so that my parents wouldn't bother me because I had to read this book. Another one that was similar to that in effect on me was Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. In terms of being a writer, The Language of the Night by Ursula Le Guin is tops for fantasy writers. And in terms of being a feminist writer, anything by Joanna Russ, How to Suppress Women's Writing, that had tremendous effect on me. I read it over and over and over, and I recognized myself. I went through this. I went through that. I went through this inability to get a handle on something because I hadn't studied, because all the writers I had studied were male, and I couldn't seem to enter their world. What else? Oh, I have here Bambi by Felix Salten and Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. They were the books that I wore to pieces as a kid. I still have them, but they are all in pieces with rubber bands around them. Is that it? Yes, I think I got it.
Well, thank you so much for that list, because I'm sure a lot of our audience is going to put it down and put them on their reading lists. So thank you so much for that. And also thank you so much, Nancy, for being a part of our event today. I've had a wonderful time talking to you, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from just listening in on the conversation. Right?
Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So our next event is tomorrow. It's on May 8th with the author Frances Hardinge at 4 p.m. IST. She will discuss her book titled Deep Light, which is on the reading list of the NLF Reading Challenge. Please do follow us on our social media handles to receive regular updates on forthcoming events. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to interacting with you soon. In the meanwhile, stay safe, take care, and happy reading.